Singapore was where it was held. It was the Shangri-La Dialogue. This is the big Asian Security Summit over the weekend. A whole lot of defence ministers from around the world turn up and they discuss a lot of the key global issues. This was where, of course, US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth urged us to lift our defence spending to 3.5% of GDP, he says, as soon as possible.
NATO members are pledging to spend 5% of their GDP on defence, even Germany. So it doesn't make sense for countries in Europe to do that while key allies in Asia spend less on defence in the face of an even more formidable threat.
Peter Jennings joins me now, Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, and I would suspect, Peter Jennings, you'll correct me, someone who spent plenty of time at the Shangri-La Dialogue in the past. Interestingly, you know, Richard Marles was all sort of tea and sympathy when he was over there with Hegseth in Singapore. You get back to Australia, though, and the leader shuts him down. The Prime Minister says, we're not interested in this at all. He's crowing about his 2.4% of GDP spend. Have a listen.
We cannot leave it to the United States alone. Other countries must contribute to this balance as well, and that includes Australia.
What we'll do is we'll determine our defence policy, and we've invested just across the forwards an additional $10 billion in defence.
OK, Peter, you're the expert here. Help people at home to understand. If we're going to spend 2.4, the US says, nah, it's really got to be 3.5. Why is the increase so important?
Well, for a start, the 2.4% that the Prime Minister talks about only really clicks in about 8 years' time. We're seeing virtually minimal change in this term of government from the projections which were actually set for defence in the 2016 White Paper that was written over a decade ago. It doesn't fit the strategic circumstances that we now face of conflict in Europe and the Middle East, and a much greater risk of conflict in the Asia-Pacific region. The 3.5% figure that Pete Hegseth talks about, I think, is a mark, Peter, of roughly where American defence spending is these days. And we're so far back from that, really because we've been riding on American security coattails for the better part of 20 or 30 years. During the Cold War, we were spending between 3 to 3.5% of defence over that period of time. And it's fallen very significantly since then. So really this is a warning from our closest ally to say we've got to get our act in order. I'm sad that it's had to be this way. I'm sad that Australian governments haven't seen their own way to concluding that we need to spend more on defence. But the call from Pete Hegseth is timely, and we really should be paying attention to it.
And when he says it's got to happen now, sooner rather than later, and you make the point the PM's looking at the 2.3, 2.4, 8 years to a decade away, it's all, of course, built around China and this concern, and 2027 is a magic date for so many defence analysts, that they will move on Taiwan. Hegseth makes this absolutely brutally clear on the weekend. Have a listen.
Any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not, but it certainly could be.
Do you think with Hegseth and Trump and the plain speaking that they're copying now from the United States, that this might cause China to rethink? Or do you think Xi's age and his determination to do this, to do the whole reunification piece, as he sees it, for China, is the real timeline?
It definitely is a timeline, because I think Xi Jinping is not going to die wondering. He's going to have a go in this, his third term of being China's president. I mean, he's president for life, but he's now 72, Peter, and I think that basically this is the moment for him. You know, Richard Marles at Shangri-La kept talking about a lack of transparency in Chinese planning. That's simply not true. Xi has been telling the military to be ready for war in 2027, and he says it repeatedly when he gives speeches. Of course, they'd rather take over Taiwan peacefully, but I think they are more than prepared to do it militarily if they feel they have to. And something in the second half of this decade is going to happen.
ASPI, you know ASPI well, you worked for them for many years, Australian Strategic Policy Institute. They've gone out there and said Labor's refusal to lift spending is a huge problem. And quite rightly, I think most experts, most analysts would stand behind ASPI. China only a couple of years ago said ASPI's got to go. In its list of demands, ASPI was one of the things that they called on Anthony Albanese to scrap. The Prime Minister hit back. He attacked ASPI, basically on China's side, attacked their independence. Were you surprised by how, I guess, negative the Prime Minister was here, given this has been a body that's been broadly supported and strongly supported by both sides of politics for a very long time?
Yes, I thought the comments were bizarre and frankly not fitting someone who wants to present himself now as an elder statesman in Australian politics. You know, Anthony Albanese shouldn't be so glass-jawed, Peter. What ASPI was saying in that report is pretty much the mainstream view of that small group of people which actually looks at defence and security, which is that we are significantly underfunded, that the current Defence Force is being cannibalised to pay for future submarines, which we won't see for 10 or 15 years, and we are facing a crisis situation. That's not just ASPI, that's me. I've written a book with a number of my colleagues on precisely this point just very recently. It's almost everyone that looks at defence. Even those people that don't like the American alliance say that we need to be spending more on defence. And so for the Prime Minister to be so sort of mean in the way he picked out ASPI, I thought was bizarre. And it shouldn't escape anyone that that's actually one of China's demands of Australia, is that we should shut down think tanks which say things that are critical of them. Why is the Prime Minister giving this gift to the Chinese? You know, he really needs to be more broad-shouldered and actually look at the content of that ASPI report, which was pretty good.
We'll leave it there. Peter Jennings, thank you.